We have our, what I'm colloquially calling the CIO panel. Let me introduce everybody we've got up here. Bob Costello, CIO of CISA. Ryan Lewis, CEO of Rancher Government Solutions. Preetha Mehra, CIO of USPS. And Jeff Schilling from National Cancer Institute. He's the CIO there. We're going to be talking about modernization because, you know, we talk a lot about legacy IT infrastructure and how that needs to be modernized. Things are shifting towards agile and digital environments. So let's get into it. Preetha, I want to start with you because I know we talked about this, you know, in the run-up to this. What are the strategic shifts from legacy to more modern systems, and how is that important for this efficiency project?
Sure. So we've been on a massive modernization journey in the last 4 years. If anyone's read our Delivering for America plan, we've essentially modernizing a lot of our core capabilities in the Postal Service, which means the CIO group has a large responsibility. And so we've been on an immense journey. The first part of it was actually drawing out a vision for the CIO group on what should we focus on, what are those mission critical capabilities. And I'm going to say that many times in this presentation is that, you know, we have 900 legacy applications. I couldn't possibly modernize it all. So we very strategically selected those mission critical applications, for example, our logistics platforms. And one of the big elements of the journey is moving from sort of monolithic legacy to more modular, right? So an API first architecture, microservices, and how we stitch that all together. So in an organization like ours, to modernize our logistics platform, we couldn't do it all in one fell swoop. So it's very sort of modular. We take the most mission critical, the most high value applications, draw those out, and then sometimes we stay on legacy for the rest because it's not so important. The other big things we've done is really looked at defined champions of change, because that's really important when you modernize, is we actually restructured our CIO group and really expanded our architecture group. It was 8 people, it's now 50. And they are the champions of change. So they sort of are the messiahs that take in and anything that is being modernized, ensuring that we are using modern capabilities. Now with AI and ML, it's almost like, is there an application here to bring in machine learning to make it smarter than just doing that? So champions of change, and then changing the organization and creating that culture of technology curiosity. Because when you have a legacy group and you now want to bring in all these new technologies, how do you do that? And instead of forcing them, we had a culture of curiosity. So we put out tech chats to everybody and said, here, you want to learn about AI, you want to learn about ML. We actually invited all our vendors, which is very unheard of in government. We invited them into the tech chats to talk about their modern technology. So that's just some of the things we did. It's pretty comprehensive.
There's a lot, and there's a lot that I want to pick on that in a minute, but we'll put a pin on that. And Jeff, I want to ask the same sort of question to you, because NCI, USPS, different agencies for sure, different size, different scale. What does it look like for you?
I would say we're definitely a different scale.
Yeah.
We don't have the legacy that a large organization has. We're very modern. I would say where we really have issues with modernization is around the people, making sure that we have the right training available for everyone. And that I think the one thing that is very complex about modernization is that the way you were doing something, it's not only not the way you're going to do it technically, but it doesn't fit. So you have to align 15 ways of doing something into 6 ways of doing something. And that's very technically, of course, challenging, but for the people, it's very challenging. Because how they define themselves is usually through success of the work that they're doing. And then you're changing that work. And so you really want to be able to make sure that they have the training and the confidence to be successful. Some of the things like changing the culture and making sure they're available. But for us, the biggest focus is on data, making sure that we have the data all available and ready for AI. And I think the one thing that is very different than for us than most organizations is we're doing research. So what was right last year isn't really right today. And of course, the scientists all keep up with that, but they keep up with that in a model of create a hypothesis, do experiments, publish on those experiments. So they're all reading literature every day. Now AI is helping them do that, but we need to get the AI to understand that's no longer true, what you learned last year.
Yeah.
This is now what is true. And so I think that we're really going to look towards certification of data sets, more formalized structure around what is believed to be today, and have a cadence where, so the AI learns like, in 2024, this is how this drug was known to interact with humans. Today, this is how that drug is known to interact. Right. And so I think that will be important, both historical for research and for all practitioners in the cancer space.
For sure. I mean, we will definitely get into data. I don't want to dig too deep into that because I do have questions about that. But I know, Bob, you were really nodding your head there. Where's your perspective on this?
Well, I think in a couple areas. So it's really interesting, like we all have different mission sets, but like the CIO's job is to enable the operators to do their job. It doesn't matter, everyone has a mission, and it's our job to help them accomplish that through technology. So over at CISA, I've been there now, it's like almost official, like 4 years, yay.
Nice.
Yeah. So, when I started there, it was a much different CIO's office. I had come from a highly operational workforce over at Customs and Border Protection, where I was there for 9 years, and then 4 years before that over at Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We didn't have some of the same things that you would typically see, say like a help desk or a security operations center. So I got to greenfield a lot that we built. And we're just finishing this year of migrating to our new greenfield environment. So we're like the first really mid-size, or actually the first agency really in the federal civilian executive branch that's completely deprecated Active Directory. So that's kind of a big deal. Some of our other work that we concentrate on, again, the workforce, like year one hiring, technical staff. And my job right now is to make sure that the entire agency can modernize quickly, that we're highly effective, and that we continue to harden our own terrain to make it difficult for the adversaries. Part of Zero Trust is I wake up every morning thinking I could have a breach. Right. Something bad could happen. Knowing your environment is very important. But then also one of my challenges, I'm sure much like the researchers, I got a bunch of hackers that work for us. I got a bunch of very technical people. So we bring them in as we're building our environments, help us break this, help us build it. So my goal is that my team is seen as part of the mission, and that we're there each day with them. So the threat hunters actually feel that the CIO understands their mission.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the environments, and I know there's different missions, different things. Ryan, I want to bring you into this to talk about the interoperability between environments and bringing them modernizing. Now, obviously, we're talking about applications, we're talking about systems, we're talking about systems of systems. How do you get it so this stuff works together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, back to one of Preetha's points, right? One of the things that, as part of our overall modernization effort, right, it's certainly not just legacy applications or bringing in new capability, but it's also then what's been bringing in new vectors, right, for whatever environment you're supporting. So this often comes in the form of edge, right, whereas when I first started out, right, in IT, right, we really talked about edge and the concept of mobile, right? Here's an app, we want to harden it. Now it really can mean anything. It can mean smart device, right, that's being run at an airport. It can be anything in a mail distribution plant. Whatever the case may be, it's just another node in your environment. And often when you talk about hackers, those are often, right, the areas where they're doing a lot of maybe innovative things or making a lot of dynamic changes. I remember, being one of those people back in the day supporting CVP, for example. And I think part of the complexity with that is that it's not just making sure whatever those capabilities are that work, but it's tying that all back right to the broader enterprise. The whole benefit of going through some of this modernization effort is that you have a single pane of glass to look across all of your resources. So you're breaking away from this concept of, we've modernized in one category or one area, and then we have everything else kind of running off in silos. Because to bring in some of the newer capabilities today, it becomes rapidly untenable, right? If you're not centrally managing these resources, or at least having some sort of visibility into that, it's not a surprise, Bob, that you say you're going to start with Active Directory. It's a no-brainer, right? Who's logging in? Who has access to these things? Who are we tasking with control of that, right? There's a lot of other logical next steps that go down from that, whether it's in a critical application or as you go more broadly.
I saw you were nodding. Where's your perspective on this to build off that?
Data. Data.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, with an organization as large as ours, we have data sets that everybody owns. Don't touch my data, it's mine. And
Right.
finance says that's mine, and this one says. So we had to break down a lot of the data silos. And once we established a chief data and analytics office, the prime function of that office is really enterprising our data. Not only are we enterprising it, but we're also making sure that it's tagged correctly, that we have the right metadata, because, it was me, in my simplistic way, my head of engineering came to me and said, here, all these manuals that our dudes have to keep referencing to fix machines, I wanted an AI. I said, that should take a week. And yeah, really, just to take those manuals, and we were using Azure Foundry, and to put it in and to sort of break it out into discrete data sets, and for the models to actually understand the data, it took us 3-4 months to chunk it correctly and all of this. And there was a lot of learning, of course. But on the enterprise level, I think if you can start thinking about, and the way we went on the data journey is we didn't go out and do data management for all our data sets. As we defined our mission critical priorities, we took those systems and allied data, and those were the ones that we began putting into a Unity catalog using Databricks, opening up those definitions for our developers, making sure our developers understood what this data journey meant, and then making sure that you had a common definition of a data set across IT and the business. And once you start organizing your data correctly, there is immense power in how quickly you can bring value to the organization.
Yeah, I imagine that's just a huge help. But I said we're going to get back to data. We're right in it. Jeff, let's talk about data governance, security, accessibility. I know these are the kinds of things that you really have to worry about.
I mean, we have had a long-standing vocabulary and thesaurus model in cancer. Of course, it's very complicated. We all know it's a lot of terminology, and for an example, we used to think cancer was hundreds of diseases, now it's thousands of diseases. As we identify those diseases as at the genetic level, at the molecular level. So, of course, it's very important to anyone who gets it to understand exactly what they have, and then to break down the treatments to say, this treatment actually works in this case, and now we understand why it doesn't work in these other cases. So I think we're really, it's worth mentioning that we're really right at the crossroads of the end of not utilizing all the data that's collected in normal treatment. It might not really be clear to everyone, but the FDA only collects very little information on medical history. Only if there's a serious adverse event will that be reported to the FDA. The rest of the time, all the normal treatments they just live in the patient's medical record. So today now with HHS coordinating many of these efforts, and NIH and FDA, we're looking at, they call it the real world data initiative. But it's really saying, we have all this data, it's kind of locked in these records, and we want to be able to bring that data together. Of course, that's going to be difficult because the data it's only collected for 2 reasons, for payment and for standard of care, like continuity of care. so that the doctor can look at it or the nurse practitioner can look at it and say, oh yeah, I remember what happened last time you were here. Sure. So if you're going to take that and actually pull other information out, I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start asking the medical community to put that data in. So I think, to me, that's where the transition starts to happen, where we're repurposing data that was collected for one reason, and now we're using it for another. But in the long run, we need to make that data entered for all the reasons we want to use it for. Because otherwise, especially with AI, it will make mistakes, and we don't want that, right? So we need to be very explicit about what we're doing. So I think that's really the transition where now that we have medical records that are electronic throughout the country, we can start to see it as a golden opportunity to transform that. Now, granted, we do need a legal structure to do that, because right now, with the way HIPAA is built, we can't do that, right? We can't just share records, or they have to be anonymized. And as soon as they're anonymized, I can't follow you throughout the history of your life.
Right.
So you lose a lot of the value. So I think that is the country and the politicians and the lobbyists, everybody, they will see the value in that. If they don't see it, other countries will surpass us, and we know that's not going to happen. So I think there will be some structure built in so that monetarily it's supported, that doctors and clinicians are reimbursed for the time they use to enter that information. But it's millions and millions of records versus tens of thousands in clinical trials. So I think it'll be very valuable. And we have the capability to do it, right? We're not lacking technology. We're kind of lacking the cohesivity of vision. I say we are lacking. We're not. We were lacking it. We have it today. We just need to kind of let everything catch up, the legal and policy for it.
Well, I want to bring that to you, Bob. Just generally the notion of that cohesion throughout government. Obviously, CISA is dealing with a lot of different agencies and dealing with that. How do you see that in the modernization world? And if you want to talk about data and all those things,
sure.
I'm sure you have ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm sure there's some people that have worked with me here before. I'm action-oriented, and I don't do theater. And I know some of you are here to learn how to better work with us. And I think, one of the things that I try and do in my organization, yes, we have a ton of data. We pull into some of the systems that I now manage, probably 20 petabytes a day, or terabytes. It's a lot. And then there's other systems, and there's a lot going on. One of the things that I think has to be understood is, the value of the data to the mission, how long we keep the data, which is absolutely critical when we start talking about anything that could have PII or other information in it. And we deal with that quite extensively across the department. But I think what I try and concentrate on is I am not going to hopefully ever be that person that's, the latest buzzword in IT. AI is great. We've been doing it for a long time. We were doing predictive AI for a long time at the department. Many, many years on our work over at CBP and elsewhere. So what I'm really concentrating on is how do we enable and understand the mission better in my office to deliver better solutions to improve mission outcomes. And I think all of us here will probably be very embedded with our mission operators. And that means sometimes I have to spend a day with the CFO, not to try and get money, which I'm also doing, but to understand her mission. What do your people need to be more effective? Because the agency can't function if we don't have a working financial system. The agency can't function if we don't have a working human capital system. No one wants to be that employee that doesn't get paid or the contract invoice that doesn't get paid on time. So I really see my role as the CIO. You're kind of the glue that can either make or break an organization. So it is all about the data, but knowing what data is important, why that data is important, how long that data needs to be important, and who it's important to. And there are many different stakeholders that we have. As you highlighted, CISA is one of the most exciting places I've ever worked. I always say that because I still say my time in uniform at the NRO was wicked cool. Sure. I wanted to be an astronaut, which I guess there's still time. we get to work in a different way. We're a partnerships organization. So state, local, territorial, and tribal governments depend on us. Our cyber hygiene program has over 10,000 enrollees, across the nation. That's pretty darn amazing for our agency. The federal civilian executive branch agencies depend on us. And then we work with critical infrastructure, both the private side of that as well as maybe that municipality that's running a water treatment plant. So it's really important that we can even stitch things together to see if something is happening. And that's what I'm really concentrating on right now, that fusion of cyber, infrastructure, and risk data to break down those silos that you mentioned, because I had that too. That's my data, no one else can see it. I really don't care if my analysis is not as informed as it could be because no one else can see my data. We're really starting to leverage the executive order on breaking down information silos to tamp that down, and I am super excited for that type of work.
No, Brian, I saw you nodding. I know obviously the breaking down the silos thing and all the legacy. We've talked about software applications, we've talked about systems of systems. Where are you coming from on the rest of the things that we've talked about?
It's interesting that the increasing demand for access to data has driven sort of the broader application modernization effort,
Sure.
Right? Because as one goes, the other goes, right? So if historically, if you think about some of your most critical applications, right? Just as they were designed themselves, almost access to data is all or nothing, right? And I used to be one of those people saying, hey, can I have access, please? And I promise I will record all my logs and everything.
Right. Yeah.
But as, there isn't a day that goes by, right, where there isn't some new functionality or capability. You mentioned building out, right, just as a RAG pipeline. Well, in order to do that, then you have to be able, right, to have a modern microservices infrastructure running underneath all of that. So any agency or anyone down right in a particular program has the flexibility to say, I want to make these changes. I want to grant access to a particular program or researcher. Doing that in a legacy format is, it's just ultimately it's untenable, right? And in some cases, right, it's not even an option, no matter how much money or time you throw at it. And I think if you wind the clock back to when, over 10 years ago, when something like Kubernetes first came out, there was so much conceptual promise around it and excitement. But now, right, you almost have top-down needs driving in where you're saying, I want application or I want a new functionality to tie into this app on this API under this requirement, and I'm going to rip it out for a set period of time when that's no longer needed by the mission. That was something that no one was thinking about when that first got started, but that's the dialogue today. And so that's why it's so spot on.
I can talk to what he's saying, because when we just recently launched a platform, it's an API platform for our business customers to come in and interact with us. So it's all shipping needs, whether it's creating a label. In the yesteryears when we did something, if it worked, it would be fabulous. Now it's like it has to have under 100 millisecond latency, and it has to be 24/7 on. I was like, who's buying product? Never mind, there's always someone buying product in the middle of the night. So, the barometers are just so different right now based on, what Ryan was saying.
Yeah, I mean, the speed, obviously, and the demands are different. How do you, Jeff, I'll go to you on this, just the notion of the top-down versus the operators, like how do you manage that change for efficiency, for modernization?
I think it's evolution. Basically what we've seen, once we started aggregating data, like breaking down some of these silos about who owned what systems and we brought it together, we first really had to create a set of formal standards so that we limited access to the raw data so that the results of the analysis would be the same from different groups. Because of course they're vying for funding or they're vying for a different, the way they feel the portfolio should go. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody was touching the base data, not touching the base data, they were touching the what we call the secondary level of data that was made available to them. So we had to change that model and make sure that no one had access to the raw data, only had access to the layer above. And then it was really just going to each of the groups with the CFO. That was one of the big deal because it was a lot of financial data, and making sure that one of the issues that we have is we have a separation between the research that we perform in the government and the research and the money that goes out. So that's because when the grants come in, they have a lot of intellectual property in them, right? This is the researchers in the country are going to say, this is how we're going to solve this problem. Well, the internal researchers cannot see that because, of course, that would all of a sudden be their idea. So we have this wall between, so we have to kind of separate that. So that wall was artificially creating a lot of barriers. And because the financial analysts might work on both sides, right? They don't necessarily care. So I think it was really that maturation. And then I guess the other thing I wanted to say in terms of IT modernization was that we were using a lot of platforms. So we were having vendors come in and help us with this transformation, and they had done it 100 times before. So they were very mature, but also very expensive. So once we had done that level for a few years, now we're moving to more just generic tools, cloud capabilities directly, or more open tools, because we now know how to do that transformation. We don't have to pay for that expensive platform to do it. And then we did it knowing that we were probably going to get out of those expensive platforms. So we put all the code in GitHub. We standardized all the data transforms so we can move that into some more lower cost platforms that we do.
And yeah, I know the cost efficiency is something that's important. I know, Ryan, that's something that from the industry side you're seeing as well. How are you sort of taking that and getting it so that agencies like NCI, USPS, whatever, can scale these systems and don't have to duplicate work or do these sort of inefficient problems in modernization?
Absolutely, and just listening to you talk on that, right? There is sort of a logarithmic progression, right, that's occurring, right? And when you let the genie out of the bottle, right, where people now are starting to see the benefits from moving to a modern system where they can focus more of their development time, either writing business logic or just doing the work on top of those apps, no one's going to go back and say, you know what I want to do is I want to spend 6 months going into a proprietary platform and then dealing with all this other stuff. Right, and so I think ultimately where we see a lot of our benefit, we were talking this beforehand, is even simplifying even further wherever an organization or program office is at, right, leveraging what they have in place. So if you're operating, right, within on-prem plus cloud, multi-cloud, or whatever edge environment, meeting where you're at, where you can see a single pane of glass, so you're not waiting for a migration effort plus then a modernization effort. So then maybe 6 months from now, I'm coming back to you with something you can work on. It starts, I think, probably the most exciting thing that we see across any of our deployments now is that this is not conceptual, right? Both us leveraging, just for us for a minute, us leveraging open source, but now being able to kind of dynamically plug into different environments and grow from there, right? That's something that we can do, or in the broader tech industry can do today, right? And it's much more a question of just which applications do we start with and how do we expand systematically. That was not something that I think people were thinking about even six years ago. We were talking about the rush to get, fully virtualized into a singular cloud environment. I think it's changed a lot more now to be, we'll grow with you, figure out what works best, and we can iterate as we go. So much more dynamic.
Yeah, I imagine iterating as you go, especially with the tools available, that's like critical for modernization, for efficiency. I saw you nodding to some of the stuff that Ryan was talking about there, about those sort of things. How are you seeing that at USPS?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that, as I mentioned, firstly, ruthlessly prioritizing what value, because technology is very pizzazzy these days. So really trying to figure out where to spend your effort for the return in investments, for your organization. And then I think there are some technologies now that are going to sort of catapult our experiences. When you think about, obviously AI and machine learning, but now when you think about agentic AI, that's an area we're now grappling with in the Postal Service, how to bring that in. We're looking at automating our entire DevSecOps pipeline, but truly to get to where we want to go, you want to bring in agentic AI, which is, these autonomous agents that will automate your complex tasks, which will personalize your experience, which will really help drive the efficiencies. And I think those organizations that are able to, first of all, prepare their data and then harness that data with all these intelligent tools are the ones that are going to win.
Well, particularly on that piece too, right? If you're on that end, right? If we're talking about, you kind of see the application layer start to shrink because now people are more empowered with whatever tools are available, whether they're native in an enterprise offering or something that's built locally. It then immediately lends itself to say, well, why wouldn't I be having agents dynamically provision my own infrastructure, whether that sits on-prem, whether I'm spinning it up brand new in a new cloud environment. That I think is something that right now it's a lot of times in conversation, but if we're all sitting here next year, we're going to be talking about a lot of use cases where that's actually happening now.
Well, I think it is happening at a lot of places, and I think what you're really describing, though, is it needs to be transparent to the people actually using the systems.
Right.
And I think where we need to be careful as CIOs is not to get over our skis when we're trying to roll out things that don't actually help people. So I can make any bad process run a lot faster. I'm wicked good at that. Like I can take all those bad human capital processes and just make them go super fast, and they're still bad. And that's where I think we need a lot of help from industry to really work with us and say that. So we rolled out a new human capital system. It's not done yet. It'll be done this year. But we actually deliberately went a little bit slower because we knew our processes were not where they needed to be. So we didn't just want to take the old processes and move them in. And by the same token, like my fellow federal CIOs here, I couldn't use AI in that space because I can't really use AI to make a decision on a person's benefit. We could do some other things that were really interesting. So I think on my landscape, what we're trying to help people do is, to Preeti's point, be better at your job, spend less time shifting between systems. Because I think in the federal government, like many places, we've been talking about IT modernization since like 1995. I was thinking when you said like a mobile app was cool, I'm like, God, when I first started, the Edge was that extra mainframe terminal about 300 yards away. That was fun. But what we're really looking at is we still, like in my space, we're recruiting from the same pool that everyone else is for a lot of our mission sets. I need my threat hunters to be the best in the world and have the best technology, and it won't always be that flashy AI thing that you come in and show us. It might be, it might not be. And so what I'm really excited for is, a better relationship with industry to drive solutions, because no one will say, wow, Bob, you did a really great job, you saved $50 million, but the mission failed. That's not what we're about. Yeah,
I mean, mission delivery is number one, I'm sure. We have time for a question or two from the Q&A if people want to come up to the mics, but if not, I'm happy to ask. I've got plenty more questions. Yes, right here. Please, sorry.
My question is for Jeff. Thank you so much for your comments and thoughts, very enlightening, and thank you for providing the context for the intramural and extramural research and data. You did mention that your focus is on data right now, but could you expand a little bit more and talk about your priorities for the upcoming year as the CIO of NCI, and maybe in general priorities for NIH, and how do you prepare for the changes that are coming with agentic AI introduction?
Well, that's a big question. We could have started with that one. So I would say we are really, really looking at aligning our technologies as much with HHS and NIH. Right now, we're running a lot of our own information technology, mostly just because of cost control and quality that we needed. The NCI was really in 1971, was in the National Cancer Act was passed, and it really gave us a leg up in much of the other institutes at NIH. So we have 70 cancer institutes throughout the country, right? We have all these doctors that we work with. It's an amazing enterprise. And so we were trying to bring some of our technological capabilities into the NIH more as the standard. And I think that's a big thing that we're doing. we're working, and I've been pulled into some HHS meetings to try to talk about how we're going to do some of these data standards that the National Cancer Institute has had for quite a while. Because again, we've had the time to put this big thing in place. So I think we're really going to focus on, I guess I would say, raising all the capabilities at NIH and mostly at NIH to the NCI standard. And I don't want to say that we're so high, right? We mostly just utilize all the great capabilities that the vendors provide. It's really just a matter of us, and you said it so many times, hyper focusing on the mission. I don't care how good IT is in any way, shape, or form. I only care that it delivers for the mission. And so all of our staff, they want to make IT great. I'm like, we don't care if IT is great. We only want to make sure that the people who need this IT are getting it and they think it's great. So it's a constant battle to make sure that people understand that. So I think that's really going to be our focus for this next year.
Well, terrific. We're a little bit over time, so I'm sorry we couldn't get to more questions, but I want to thank everyone on the panel up here and thank everybody for being part of this. And I will hand it back to Mike. We'll get off the stage.